Hello, my lovelies. I'm Ginny O, the author with no last name. And today, I want to talk about the difference between what I do as a book author and what television scriptwriters and movie scriptwriters do when we are producing our art. So, as a book writer, someone who writes novels that are right here, what I do, sitting here alone in my living room office, typing away at my computer, writing my books, is very different than what happens in a script writer's room or a screenwriter room in Hollywood or New York or Toronto or wherever your writing room is centered for making popular television shows and movies. So there is this false, really, myth that an author kind of does everything by themselves, which is not true. Okay, if you flipped open any of your big books, especially in the fantasy and sci-fi genre, what you're going to see in the acknowledgments is usually a long list of other writers, and those are the writing groups. And many authors are very open and upfront, is that they will write a draft. That draft will go to an editor or a beta reading group. That means, more than 2 people. And they will get feedback on that in order to edit the book so that it can go out again. And there are authors that, if you look in their acknowledgments, will also acknowledge that they go to writing groups, basically, that are filled with other, often big name authors. If you read the list of names in the acknowledgments for The Expanse, you're going to see a lot of very big names in science fiction and fantasy authors that they asked advice of, collaborated with, in order to write The Expanse. And then, we might write 2 or 3 different drafts that still goes to an editor, or you can be also very open about the fact that you might just have a group of people that you sit there and you just bounce ideas off of, and you just talk to them, and you use them like a rubber duck to, solve your problems. Even writing a book, which can be a very isolated endeavor, is not completely an island, because you still need that reader feedback before you publish. So even if you have just 1 or 2 people on your team, it's not just you and you alone. And then you have your formatters, your editors, the people who make your book covers, and the people who usually write your summary and your blurbs for you, your marketing team. That's another group of people in the book writing stuff. So what happens when I, author, who writes 1 or 2 books a year, if that, and you're going, Ginny, you've only published 6. We could go into a tangent about Amazon, but let's just say, as an author, I write maybe 1 or 2 books a year, which, a first draft takes roughly 2 months, and then, you have second drafting, other things, editing that has to go on, sometimes, and that's the short end of things. Sometimes these books can take over a year, to write, 6 months to a year to write from beginning to end. So you publish 1 or 2 books a year, and your agency might have a division that's movies and television related, and probably audiobooks and foreign rights. They have those too. So your agency will take your book to a studio, and they will try to get your book optioned for a movie or television show. What this means is that your book, they buy the movie and television rights to make your book into a movie or television show for a set number of years. This doesn't mean it's greenlit. It doesn't mean it's going to be produced. It's just optioned for them to consider. Okay. Now, they didn't used to option quite as many books as they do now. Now getting your book optioned is a pretty regular affair. So, you know, you sell your rights for a certain amount of money to get your book produced. And since you aren't George R.R. Martin or the Polish guy who wrote The Witcher, you're not getting millions of dollars. You're not that big of a name, especially if you're debut. And you basically, you take the money and you run. And you don't have to pay this money back. And in those 5 years, they may or may not make the show or the movie. And maybe you get to put a down payment on a house, or put some money into savings, or put on a new roof, or move out of your apartment into a better apartment. Who knows? But you get a little extra money because you have been optioned to make the movie or TV show. And if you're really lucky, they'll actually make it. But you, Joe Schmo author, don't get any say in how it's made and how they adapt your work. And this is where studios get into trouble. Because for every book series that gets a good adaptation, or book that gets a good adaptation, there's, 2 or 3 other ones that get an in-name only, or get a really bad adaptation, or just something seemingly goes wrong and it riles up the fan base. So, but when your book gets greenlit for production, that's when the writing team takes over. And there's this kind of insidious, persuasive thought going around right now that groupthink makes for bad writing. Alright, so the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. And the first book is this big. He writes between 135,000 to 150,000 words per book. 1 book a year until he had some very rational burnout, and he had to take a break for, 3 or 4 years, and then he put out 2 books in 1 year because he'd been working on them very slowly, and he's potentially back to his 1-a-year schedule. But he puts out 1 of these a year. And, this first one was actually written for his one of his novel writing classes in college. So there's that too. But that's kind of neither here nor there. So this book, which is 135,000 to 150,000 words, was the pilot for the TV show. Did you know there was a Dresden Files TV show? Well, if you didn't, are you really a Dresden Files fan? Okay, just kidding. You can be a fan of the books without knowing the TV show existed. So the TV show, I should have looked up how big the writer's room was, but the TV show has, let's see, 12 episodes, which means they were trying to do it for a mid-season run. Basically, they were going to bring this show in on a mid-season. Something failed, and this is what you were going to get. Firefly, was that kind of that way too? I don't know if this is a Fox show. No, this is a Lionsgate show. I don't know who Lionsgate sent it out to. Anyway, so Lionsgate made and produced this show. Now, Lionsgate is one of those studios that's smaller. It's not one of the huge or the big 6, but it is. But so they were taking a lot more risks than in the beginning than a lot of other studios would. So Dresden Files, The Expendables, your Divergent series. What else was made by Lionsgate? There were some like really interesting but weird things being made by Lionsgate, especially in the science fiction and fantasy segment. And now they're, you know, kind of more established, and they've built up a reputation for fairly decent movies, kind of, sort of. And, you know, they're not making quite so out-of-the-box, kind of weird urban fantasy things. So, they made a TV show. And the pilot for, the first book here was, for Stormfront, was actually episode 8. That tells you how long it's been since I've seen this book. It was actually episode 8. They took this entire book, which took them in over a year to write, and they made it one episode 2/3 of the way through the season. One book equals one episode. Full Moon, the second book in the series, I believe is supposed to be episode 3, called Hair of the Dog. One book, one season. One book, one episode. And they didn't even really adapt this book faithfully. Like, they did something else really weird with it. It had the same basic ideas, but it wasn't the same thing. So there are 12 episodes to this season, which means there were probably about 12 writers in the writer's room, if not a little more. Because even though usually only 1 or 2 people in a writer's room are credited with writing a script, everybody, all 12 writers in that writer room, assuming there were 12, usually it's 1 per episode, like I said, worked on every single script to adapt them to the show, or to come up with the storylines, to, you know, decide on the jokes, and to edit things. Because in the same time period that Jim Butcher has to write a book, they have to write 12 books. Same time period. So you need to have more brains in your room in order to create 12 times the amount of content in the same amount of time that he's creating one book. And because they're not adapting the book series from page to screen exactly, they had to make a lot of decisions and create their own kind of storylines. So in a way, the Dresden Files TV show was fan fiction of the books. Now, the books do some things really well, and the TV shows do some things really well, a lot better than the books do. Which that is, you know, going to be totally up to your own opinion. I'm not going to, you know, try to say, oh, this was better and this was worse, okay? So when this happened, Jim Butcher was very honest about the fact that he had no control over the series, where the series was going, and that, you know, that was up to the studios, the producers, and the showrunners. And, you know, the writers were being kind of told what to do, how to adapt it, type of thing. So this thought that, you know, only 1 or 2 people are writing 12 to 22 episodes a season is ludicrous. Like, everybody in your writer's room, the showrunner might have an outline, but everybody in that writer's room is sitting there and they are contributing. From the head writers, from the ones with the most experience, to the mid-level writers who are the ones, you know, with the, you know, who are the up and coming ones, and they've got some experience, but they're not, you know, they probably don't have a show under their belt yet to be considered a head writer or, you know, a showrunner. As in, they haven't gotten a show they've pitched to be produced. So they've been working on a lot of other shows, writing episodes for other shows, and working on a lot of, you know, they haven't yet managed to get one of their own original ideas turned into a show. But they have a lot of experience writing and, you know, and collaborating and bouncing ideas off back and forth, and you know, working in a writer's room. And then you have at the bottom, you have the very junior writers, the new writers, the people who are, you know, they're basically, this is like their first job, first, second, third job. The WGA has stuff set out to how many hours and how many scripts you helped or worked on and shows you've worked on to tell you where you are kind of on the ladder of being a junior, medium to head writer. So they are there to learn, and they're like, the fresh baby pays people with all these ideas. They're like the new zealots. I always know when somebody is new to a fandom because they come in and they deluge it with ideas. And when you're working with an original property, that's, you know, one thing. When you're working with an IP, that's, you know, something else. Like, you know, okay, we still have to maintain some integrity of the canon, where, you know, so people know, so people is. And the baby writers are like, I have so many ideas and I can't wait to share them. It's great. I love it. So the junior writers, you know, they're learning, they get to input the scripts, they get to help, you know, with the dialogue and stuff. And if they do a lot of work on a script, you know, they'll have a script assigned to them by the senior writer, and the senior writer and the, you know, the script director, person, coordinator, stuff. If they do a lot of work and they really like the script, then they get to go off to the studio to watch it being filmed and meet the directors and meet the casting people and meet, you know, meet all the crew and make these connections, so that, you know, as they progress in the hours and number of scripts they've written to become a mid-level writer, you know, they can become a mid-level writer, and then they can get these recommendations of, oh, I worked with this person, they're really smart, they're really clever, they have great ideas, they, you know, and they would make a really great show if you, you know, look at their, you know, look at their original IP, you know, they'd be really great at adapting this because I love it so much, type of thing. So that's how they progress in their career. And so despite the fact, you know, there's usually only one or two writers credited to every script, everybody's worked on it. And the senior level show writers, if you're a mid-level writer or a junior writer, does a massive amount of work, and they feel like they've made such, you know, they've made with the script what it is, they will then in turn give credit to that mid-level or junior level writer. And I don't, you know or really, for most IP, okay, we're not talking Witcher, Witcher is like more like a mini series than an actual television series, and that is part of the problem. But or George R. Martin's the Game of Thrones stuff, they were taking one book and trying to make one season out of it, when sometimes, because it's such an epic high fantasy thing, those books might have needed 2 or 3 seasons to really convey what was going on in the books, versus, or, you know, if, let's say they really did do a Dresden Files series, this probably could take up 2 or 3 episodes, not just 1 episode. You know, Full Moon could definitely take up at least 2 or 3 episodes. You could have some neat little cliffhangers in there. But most times, if you get a book, that book gets translated into one television episode. I think the biggest example of this, and you might not remember it, is that Paramount's Star Trek. When Paramount, they kind of own Simon & Schuster, when Paramount was doing the original series and doing The Next Generation, every single episode got a book. I think for DS9 and Voyager, that kind of happened too. It's only been recently, when Paramount's been trying to shed Simon & Schuster and they're not caring so much about their books anymore, that these new series aren't getting the novel adaptations of every episode. I mean, we had this family in our church. This was a long time ago, and I still went to church, who did a New Year's Eve party every year at this huge farmhouse they owned out here. And he was a Trekkie. Like my uncle is a Trekkie. So my uncle doesn't collect the books. My uncle collects things like video games and the ping pong tables. And like art. Like pictures of the Enterprise. And so we went to their house. And he had bookshelves and bookshelves and bookshelves. They lined this entire long hallway. They were in this one room of every single Star Trek book. And most of them were as thick as Stormfront. Okay, most of the episode adaptations were as thick as Stormfront. And they were taking the dialogue from the episode and turning them into a fiction book. You can't put out that much art. It's not content, it's art. You can't put out that much literature at one time every single week with one person. Our brains just cannot do that. And our fingers cannot type that fast. I have the Star Wars books over here. So, the Star Wars original adaptations, not the original ones, I don't have the prequels or the sequels. But the original Star Wars, each one got about an 80,000 to 110,000 word book. Empire Strikes Back. Sorry. And Return of the Jedi has a different cover. I don't know why. But, so each of them got a book. That's one movie. Dune tends to try to get one movie. Villeneuve did 2 movies. And the Sci-Fi Channel did a series for Dune and Children of Dune, too. So, Dune is kind of like Game of Thrones here. You know, it has to be, it is, where is it? It's over here. It's past the murder rods. Dune is so thick. This is epic environmentalism, anti-messianic science fiction. You can't do this in one movie, and they have tried. And I mean, and people are like, I don't like the sci-fi thing for XY technical reasons and the costumes, and like, yeah, but they actually managed to get the stuff out of the book that was important and give it the importance that it needed. And I think the most major change that they did, which was beneficial, was giving Aurelian more of a screen time when, why is this person important when she doesn't really show up until the very end, where it's like, well, she's not really important as a person, but modern audiences would prefer to know why Aurelian is important to be a little bit more invested in her character before she turns up at the end and, well, spoiler, spoiler, spoiler if you haven't read the books or seen any of the movies adaptations. I know it's from like the 60s and I shouldn't have to go spoiler, 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 but with Dune 2 coming out now next year, let's talk about it. But, like things like The Expanse, when I read it, I said it should be a television series because it take a lot to put that one book into a into a movie. I literally write the Lone Prospect like a television series. The Heaven Seasons is like a television series. I want it to be like a television series. Them trying to turn Harry Potter into singular movies was really difficult. And that was kind of also to the detriment of the Harry Potter books because they were making the movies and they had the actors, the child actors, and she hadn't finished writing them yet. So that put a lot of pressure on Rowling to finish up the books so that they could make the movies. Kind of the same thing with Narnia. They had these actors and they needed the pressure to make the movies before the actors got too old to do it. And of course, as usual, they stumbled at the silver chair. Oh, it didn't make us enough money. Just make it. You've got the money. Make it. Dear God. And I understand that they're doing another Redwall one again. I've got my moss flower works. So they're going to try to make another animated TV show out of Redwall, I guess. I hope. But, like, trying to make one episode out of this book would be impossible. I wouldn't recommend it. But most of the time, that's what happens. So that's why there was lots and lots of people in writers' room because they have to come up with, something that an author would make to 80,000 to 135,000 words. They have to come up with 12 to 22 of them in a year. And then they get a couple months rest and they have to come back and do it again. And again and again because you people love it. Give us more, give us more, give us more. And that's how you end up with 12, 15, 20-odd seasons worth of television and the actors going, let us go! We want other jobs, let us go. Anyways. So, what I do as a writer in a book, for a book, and what script writers have to do is completely different, like, proportion-wise. I can take my time with my books, and spend the year on them. They don't have a year to spend on a singular episode of television. They have, weeks or months, if that. So, and they have to come up with 22, for full season scenarios, or they have to somehow take this really thick, really, hard to digest book and get it to 6 episodes of screen time. I kind of wish that even Good Omens had more episodes. It would have done well with a few more episodes, or to really marinate, I guess. But so that's why there were groups of people who work in script writing and who work in Hollywood movies. Yes, that payroll is a pretty big down payment. But in comparison, to what you're putting out there, to how fast you're putting it out there, and how many other places in the world will buy it and pick it up, that initial down payment is a very, very small, less than 1% slice of the pie. So, and especially compared with some actor salaries, too, think about that. So, take care of yourselves, my lovelies. Stay safe, blessed, and I'll see you in the next video.